Welcome to the Broken Britain podcast. You see it everywhere, don't you? Things just seem too expensive. Services often feel like they're falling short. Maybe they're understaffed.
And you hear about people really struggling just to make ends meet. Plus all those stories about corners being cut or maybe problems just getting covered up.
It's like a constant drip in the news. But what we want to get into today is how these things might actually be connected. Are they separate problems, or is there something deeper going on?
It's easy to look at each issue in isolation, but maybe there's a common thread, a root cause linking them all together. That's what we're trying to uncover.
And probably the best way to do that is to follow the money.
What we've noticed looking into this is how much focus there's been on pure economic growth, especially, say, since the 1980s.
Okay, now on the face of it, that sounds positive, right?
Sure.
Modern capitalism, it promises rapid innovation, new services. Sounds great.
It does sound great. But here's the catch, the really interesting bit. This drive for growth often comes with a cost. A relentless drive to extract wealth.
Extract wealth.
Yeah, and this isn't just a byproduct. It seems to be the direct cause of so many of the everyday strains we feel. Think about it. Lower wages, worsening working conditions, higher prices for essentials, and, a noticeable decline in the quality of goods and services pretty much across the board.
Wow, okay. If more wealth is being extracted, pulled upwards by a few, then just mathematically, there's less left for everyone else, for the many.
So this forces most people into this constant battle to be more economical, to stretch their shrinking share of the total pie. But it's ultimately, in the long run, a losing battle. Even if you manage to save a bit here and there day to day, your overall proportion of the total wealth, it just keeps going down.
Okay, but here's where it gets interesting, right? Because the common argument is that intense competition and, the profit motive, that's exactly what drives innovation and efficiency. We're often told that without that chase for profit, things would just stagnate.
Let's be fair, many groundbreaking products and services have emerged from that drive.
Sure.
However, what's often overlooked is a really critical counterpoint.
Yeah.
Profit is not some neutral outcome. It is, by its very nature, a transfer of wealth.
A transfer. How so?
Think of it like this. If a company makes a profit on something you buy, that value has to come from somewhere. Either it's from you, the consumer, paying a higher price, or maybe from the worker being paid less for making it, or perhaps the supplier getting squeezed on their price.
Okay.
So when profit becomes the dominant motive, the main goal, other crucial factors like quality, sustainability, even just basic human well-being, they start to be treated as, optional extras, or worse, as actual obstacles to that profit. You see, in the early stages of the system we have, it can look like it's delivering miracles. Products improve, services expand, maybe prices even drop for a little while.
Right, the competitive phase.
Exactly. But as markets mature, something fundamental tends to shift. Competition often diminishes maybe through mergers or dominant players emerging. And the core economic logic moves towards, aggressive cost cutting, aiming for monopolization if possible, and extracting the maximum value for shareholders. Maintaining high quality becomes just too expensive to justify against those profit targets. So we see services outsourced, wages cut, corners trimmed everywhere. It's all to sustain returns for those who own the capital, rather than for those who actually contribute the labor or the innovative insight.
It sounds like the system itself is almost designed to reward controlling existing resources, things like property, patents, data, much more than it rewards the people who actually create new wealth, the workers doing the work.
Precisely. And this directly challenges that persistent idea, the one we hear all the time, that wealth generated through this system somehow trickles down to benefit everyone.
Yeah, the trickle-down theory.
Right. But the data, especially from the past 4 decades, it tells a very, very different story. Productivity gains, workers getting more efficient, producing more value, which should theoretically lead to better pay for everyone. Well, they simply haven't translated into real wage increases for most people.
So where did that value go?
Instead, wealth has significantly pooled right at the very top. The wealthiest 1% now own more than 20% of the total wealth. And what's fascinating, or maybe alarming here, is that this isn't some, natural result of meritocracy. It looks like a predictable consequence of a system that heavily favors financial speculation, monopolization, owning assets, much more than it values actual work or caring for people or genuine useful innovation.
So maybe instead of trickle-down, it's more like a trickle-down gush-up economy.
That's not a bad way to put it, actually. The overwhelming flow seems to be upwards.
Okay, let's dig into capitalism itself a bit. Its defenders would say, look, the profit motive drives innovation.
Yeah.
And you can see that, can't you? Especially early on.
Oh, absolutely. In the early stages of a market, you often see real improvements. Products get better, services expand, maybe prices even drop for a while. It can look miraculous.
But there's a flip side.
There seems to be. The point often missed is that profit isn't just created out of thin air, it represents a transfer of wealth. And when maximizing profit becomes the only goal, the dominant motive,
Then other things get pushed aside.
exactly, things like quality, sustainability, worker well-being, they can start to look like costs to be minimized or even obstacles to hitting those profit targets.
And what happens as markets get older, more established?
Well, often real competition starts to fade. Maybe a few big players dominate, and then the logic changes. It shifts from genuine innovation towards, well, other strategies.
Like what?
Like aggressive cost cutting, trying to create monopolies or near monopolies, and focusing heavily on shareholder extraction, basically, getting money out to the owner.
So dividends, share buybacks, that sort of thing.
Precisely. And maintaining high quality. That starts to look too expensive under this logic, so services get outsourced, maybe overseas, wages get squeezed, corners get cut on materials or safety.
All to keep those returns flowing to the owners of the capital.
That's the pattern, yes. It's not necessarily about individual greedy people, although that might exist. It's more about how the system itself is incentivized in its later stages.
So it rewards owning things, property, patents, data, more than actually doing things, creating things, the actual work.
It rewards control of existing resources over the creation of new value by labor or ingenuity.
And that's why quality suffers in the end.
It seems to be a key reason. You might get that initial burst of quality to win customers, but once the competition is weakened.
Then the game changes to squeezing as much profit out as possible.
Right, which often means lower quality for higher prices. It's baked into the motivation if profit is the only real metric, plus that drive for efficiency.
Which sounds good, but often just means fewer people doing more work.
Often, yes. And the gains from that efficiency, the extra value created, it doesn't usually go back to the workers in the form of higher pay or better conditions. It gets extracted upwards. So over time, you get this trend. Fewer people working harder, often for less pay in real terms, while the owners see their returns climb.
Okay, this is quite complex. Maybe we can simplify it.
Yeah, let's try a thought experiment. Imagine a really, really simple community. Let's call it the village of two needs.
Okay, two needs. What are they?
Just food and housing. That's all this village produces and consumes. And here's the key bit. All the infrastructure, the farms, the shops, the houses, it's all owned and managed collectively by the community, maybe by the local council or a cooperative, whatever.
So how does money work there?
Simple. People spend their money on food and rent. And that money goes directly back into the system. It pays the wages of the farmers, the builders, the shopkeepers, everyone working in the village.
And there's no profit being siphoned off by external shareholders.
Exactly. No dividends going out, no massive marketing budgets, no landlords demanding higher and higher returns just because they own the property. The money just circulates internally.
So if the village is stable, same population, same amount of food needed, same houses,
Yeah.
what happens to the money?
Well, the total amount of wealth in the village stays pretty much the same year after year, which means you could, in theory, have a fixed amount of money circulating.
And no inflation or deflation.
Potentially, yes. Stable prices, stable wages, everyone gets housed, everyone gets fed. The main goal isn't endless growth. It's stability, sufficiency, maybe dignity.
Okay, I get the model, but it sounds, well, maybe a bit boring.
Yeah.
Not much innovation happening.
Probably not, no. Improvements would likely be slow. You wouldn't
Yeah.
get flashy new house designs every 6 months or radical new farming techniques overnight. Stable, yes. Maybe stagnant is the flip side.
And that's the contrast with modern capitalism, which does give us that rapid innovation, those new things.
It absolutely does. That's its strength. But, as we've discussed, it comes with that constant drive to extract wealth, which leads to the problems we see, the falling wages, the higher prices, the declining quality.
Okay, so let's tweak the village model slightly. What if the village decides, let's get a private company in to handle housing repairs, and that company needs to make a profit?
Okay. Now things change. A slice of the money that used to go straight back into paying local wages or maybe funding community improvements
Is now being taken out.
Exactly. It's being extracted from that circular flow and ending up in the private contractor's bank account. That contractor now has more spending power, but implicitly everyone else in the village has slightly less.
And if you scale that up, privatize housing management, then the food shops, then maybe the farms.
Then the whole system starts to tilt. Decisions start getting made based on what extracts the most wealth, not what's best for the community overall.
So, cutting staff, using cheaper materials, raising prices or rents.
All those things become logical if the main goal is maximizing profit extraction for the owners, rather than providing good quality food and housing for the residents. It benefits the few who own, often at the expense of the many who live and work there.
So the really stark insight from this simple model is what?
It's that when profit extraction is the main driver, you can end up in a situation where the very people growing the food and building the houses can barely afford to eat well or live securely themselves.
Because the value they create is being siphoned off before it gets back to them.
Precisely. In the simple village model, that couldn't really happen because there's no mechanism for that external extraction. The people creating the value also essentially own the means of creating it. The wealth stays within the community. That's the core idea that gets hidden by all the complexity of modern finance.
Which really makes you wonder, doesn't it? Are we saying we're not clever enough to design an economic system that keeps the good bits of competition, the innovation, the progress, the efficiency,
but somehow filters out the bad bits? The relentless wealth extraction, the falling quality, the squeezed living standards for so many.
Is the only way to get new ideas or better tech, really, to let a few people become astronomically wealthy while everyone else feels the pinch?
It does raise fundamental questions. What if, for example, you had a community or a company based on shared wealth that did reward great ideas and improvements?
But not by making one person a billionaire.
Right. The reward for innovation doesn't have to be billions in personal wealth. It could be more time off, better working conditions for everyone, public recognition, increased community support, or simply the entire community sharing fairly in the gains.
So the benefits of innovation are shared broadly, rather than just concentrated.
Exactly. So the community as a whole benefits from progress instead of feeling squeezed by it.
Yeah.
This isn't about destroying capitalism entirely, maybe. It's more like post-capitalism.
Yeah.
Moving beyond a system that feels like it might be past its sell-by date for delivering broad benefits.
You don't have to ditch markets or incentives altogether.
Not necessarily, but maybe we need to seriously redesign how those incentives work so they genuinely serve society as a whole, not just a wealthy minority.
So the real challenge isn't just defending or attacking the current system.
No, it's asking, what would a genuinely better version look like, and how could we possibly get there?
Which leads us, inevitably, to politics. Because changing the system requires political will.
And this is where it gets, frankly, quite frustrating. There seems to be a real lack of clear, ambitious, future-focused economic vision from the main political parties.
You mean they're not really offering fundamental alternatives?
Pretty much. It feels like mostly tinkering around the edges, arguing about small changes to tax bans or chasing GDP growth targets or managing inflation figures. Lots of vague talk about growth.
But not addressing the underlying structure. The way the system itself funnels wealth upwards and can lead to declining quality of life for many.
That seems to be missing from the mainstream debate. You'd hope parties would paint a picture of an ideal future economy, explain it clearly, and say, here's how we plan to transition towards it.
Something people could actually understand and get behind.
Yes. Give people a positive vision, invite discussion, allow for gradual democratic change, and hold parties accountable to those long-term values, not just short-term promises.
But that's not really happening, is it? It feels like there's an unspoken rule. Don't question the fundamentals too much.
Right. It don't sound too radical or unrealistic. But the result of not questioning it seems to be the slow, managed decline we're experiencing.
And is there anything specific holding back that kind of bigger thinking, that structural reform?
Well, one major obstacle that keeps coming up is the voting system itself. First past the post. The argument is that first past the post isn't just a bit old-fashioned, it actively works against fundamental change. It tends to entrench the two dominant parties and makes it incredibly hard for new ideas or smaller parties with different visions to get a foothold.
Okay, explain why something like proportional representation is seen as more democratic or better for enabling change.
Well, the basic idea is fairness. Under proportional representation, pretty much every vote counts towards the final result. Seats in parliament roughly match the percentage of votes each party gets nationwide.
Unlike first past the post, where if you don't back the winner in your local area, your vote basically counts for nothing.
Exactly. Millions of votes effectively wasted. Proportional representation gets rid of that. It also means you don't have to vote tactically. You can vote for the party you actually believe in, knowing it will likely count.
And that would allow new ideas and smaller parties to get heard more easily.
Definitely. They'd have a realistic chance of winning seats, which would force the bigger parties to engage with their ideas. It changes the whole dynamic of political debate.
What about the argument that first past the post gives us strong, stable governments?
That's the common defense, isn't it? But what strong often means in practice is a government winning maybe 40% or even less of the popular vote, but getting 100% of the power. They can then push through policies that a majority might actually disagree with.
Whereas proportional systems usually lead to coalitions.
Yes, which means parties have to negotiate, compromise, build consensus. Some see that as weakness, others see it as strength derived from broader consent and legitimacy, not just gaming the electoral system. Accountability can arguably be clearer, too, as coalition partners keep checks on each other.
It's noticeable how little the major parties talk about changing the voting system, though.
It is telling, isn't it? Any party that isn't actively advocating for proportional representation can't be truly serious about fairness or representation or building trust. Because without it, radical economic ideas struggle to get traction, public anger gets channeled in unproductive ways, and real structural reform remains incredibly difficult.
So why wouldn't they push for it if it's arguably fair?
Well, the simple, perhaps cynical answer is it threatens their own power. Why would a party that knows it can win absolute power on less than half the vote want to change to a system where it would almost certainly have to share power?
Right. It locks in the status quo.
It seems designed to do exactly that.
So bringing this all together, what does it mean for people listening? Where does this leave us?
Well, it suggests that if we want things to change fundamentally, we can't just wait for the existing political system to deliver it on a plate. It might be up to us, the public, to demand these bigger conversations and for new voices to keep pushing these issues into the open.
If we really want to see an improvement in our services, our housing, our wages, our general sense of well-being,
then we need to ask that fundamental question. What is the economy actually for? Is its primary purpose to enrich a small group? Or is it to provide a decent, stable, dignified life for everyone?
it's about thinking constructively about the future.
Exactly. How do we build an economy where competition genuinely serves the public good, where wealth is shared more fairly, where innovation benefits everyone, and where just owning stuff isn't automatically rewarded more than actually creating value?
That's the challenge. Finally, spreading awareness is crucial. And so if you're someone who questions the usual narrative, please give this a like, as it helps us reach more people like you. This has been another journey of discovery right here on the Karma Peony channel. Thanks for joining us.